Hey, it's Simeon here with you. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. We're at Phenomecon in Vernal, Utah. This is, I think, the second or third Phenomecon. And I have a special guest with us. There's been a lot of great presentations, but I happened to run into James Szubski, who we met a couple months ago at his Margies outdoor store, where we did a really great interview, and he told us about Bingen, Washington, all of the paranormal phenomena, for lack of a better word, cryptids, and sightings of orbs and UFOs in and around that area. And James, as I mentioned in the previous video, is the only person that I've ever met that has a reporting station inside his store for folks to come in and file their reports of what they see in and around the Hood River, Cascades, Mount Adams, Mount Rainier area.
Hi.
And so, James, you said you have over 200 reports now?
Yeah. So we've had close to 220 reports. And they come in a bunch of different ways. You know, we've got the physical forms that people fill out. You're now online at margiesoutdoorstore.com.
People can do it online. It's very important. You can just go to...
And then a lot of folks contact me via Facebook. Often we'll get stopped in the street, at the grocery store or the post office, and people will tell me their stories. And so we were talking earlier, there's a really interesting thing that's happening. We are getting tons, and I shouldn't say tons, a lot of the reports seem to be just one-off creatures, one-off cryptids, things that don't seem to have, we don't get a lot of, like the ape cat, we've had over 70 reports. Some of these, it's just a single but highly credible report of a really unusual animal or a being of some type. So we've had, there are these, the devil dogs, we've had the praying mantis head creature, we've had gremlin-like creatures that are probably 24 inches tall with big ears and gray fur. There's another hairy creature that was 20 foot tall that was reported, and then a frilled snake. And so just this whole menagerie of strange creatures. A lot of times it's just one person filing their report. And so we're trying to make sense of how this is happening and why it's happening. My leading theory is that maybe we're at a crossroads of some type where things are passing through. And to give you a little bit of detail on some of these, the devil dog story, a woman contacted me on Facebook, and she told me about this really strange encounter she had in the forest just southwest of Mount Adams. And her family happened to be camping out there, so I drove out there, and they drove me 11 miles to the site where they had the actual encounter. So it was her son, who was, I think, 14 at the time, and then her boyfriend, ex-boyfriend now, and that individual's brother. And they all saw the same phenomena. They were camping. There was things moving around outside of the tent. They believed that something actually turned off a LED light strand, and this was something that had a switch, so it's the kind of thing that you can't bump. You have to manipulate.
Wow, we turned off the lights.
Yeah. So they got out, and they were sitting around the campfire. They heard a whistling, so the son started whistling back, and then the whistles got closer until they were then surrounded. The whole camp was surrounded by whistling creatures. They estimated between 8 to 12. All just sort of hanging out outside of the edge of the firelight. They had the clear sense that these creatures were able to stand up on their hind legs, and that they were some type of four-legged creatures. As the sun started to rise, they could see them jumping around, and they described them as dog-like creatures, but definitely not dogs or wolves of any kind. They said that they were hairless, gray-skinned, about the size of a Great Dane. They had positive visual identification of two of them, and as the sun rose, they seemed to be afraid of the sun, and they took off into the forest. So that's just one.
More like an animal again, more animal-like than. They didn't get the feeling it was some sort of human-animal hybrid. Definitely some sort of animal none of us have ever seen before.
Exactly, and they were really clear on the description that, I probed them. Was it like wolf-like? Was it dog-like? Was it Great Dane-like? And they said, no, we're just using Great Dane because it's the size.
Yeah.
But no fur at all. And, as I looked at the literature, I don't see anything that sort of matches that. These little people, there's the guy who saw this creature with gray fur stand in the middle of the road. And he had to actually drive around it because it wouldn't move when he saw it.
18 to 25 inches.
Yeah, 18 to 25 inches tall with big gremlin-like ears. And we've had a couple of reports of things like that. of small humanoid-like beings. And then, of course, there's this 20-foot tall hairy creature. And when I asked the reporting parties about this, I said, so was this like a Sasquatch? They said, oh, absolutely not. It was something completely different. Interestingly, this sighting took place at night. There were streetlights there. On one side was an orchard, and the other side was an airport that the military uses occasionally. I've seen military choppers, convoys of choppers parked there and stuff like that. And they saw it coming at them at night. And of course, they were terrified and ran away. But again, this really large, hairy creature, apparently bipedal.
But not a Sasquatch. So
Not a Sasquatch.
Did not have that feeling. Different body proportions.
Different body. They sent me
20 feet high.
Yeah.
This is way up.
Yeah, so they sent me a painting of a creature they said looked like what it was.
Yeah.
And it was this sort of large humanoid hairy thing. My daughter saw a frilled snake. We were off-roading, and she looked out the window when we pulled over to let another car pass. So there's a big snake out there, Dad, a big snake, about 4 feet long, yellowish brown in color, with frills on the side of its head that were sort of like these spikes with webbing between them, and they faded from a pink color to the yellow color by the head. She was very clear in her description of it, and she was describing something she had seen seconds ago. And she didn't think that there was anything unusual about it, but I know a little bit about the wildlife in the area, and there are no frilled snakes, there are no frilled lizards. There's nothing, no scientifically recognized animal like that anywhere near the gorge, or I don't even think in western United States. And so we keep on getting these reports. For me, highly credible. My daughter, who I know when she's making stuff up and not making stuff, sees a snake with frills on its head. My employee sees a 3-foot tall humanoid creature stand on the side of the road at 2 o'clock in the morning with a praying mantis-like head. We've got these devil dogs and these small
gremlins.
creatures.
This could be like what the Native Americans described as the bugwas, the little people, something like that.
And there's definitely, those legends are replete in the area. Like this.
Replete. So there's a history of this. It's not just modern people seeing this. You look in the history of the people, indigenous peoples, they describe these creatures too.
Yeah, and the area's got a history of it. There was, right after St. Helens erupted, this Batsquatch creature that was reported a couple of times. It was like an enormous creature with a 40-foot wingspan.
Batsquatch. Yeah. That's a new one for me, James. I've never heard of Batsquatch.
But there's like this rash of reports for a couple of months around the eruption of Mount St. Helens, and then it dried up. In the 1930s, at the mouth of the Columbia. So the mouth of the Columbia is known as the graveyard of the Pacific. There's been over 2,000 ships lost there. And for comparison, the Bermuda Triangle has lost 300 ships. So this place is one of the most treacherous navigational areas in the world. And in the 1930s, there was a rash of sea monster sightings down there. Large 40 to 60 foot long creatures swimming in the water, long snake-like
neck. You mentioned that, right.
And camel-like head. It matches descriptions in the Native American stories about supernatural beings called Ayahos, which are often associated with landslides and turbulent water.
Ayahos,
yeah. So it's been a really, really interesting to see these kind of things. Like there's no, like as I try to think about how do I talk about these things, how do I do
Well, we were just mentioning this idea that you mentioned to me a couple days ago here at the conference, which is that the Columbia Gorge area has special geography and topology. And you're mentioning how it was a rift of lava opened up between what's now Idaho and Washington. How long ago?
So it was 15 million years ago. This
15.
112-mile long rift opened in the earth, giant crack. And for about 3 million years, it was volcanically active. And trillions of gallons of lava poured out of this thing. In some places, it's 3 miles thick. But these eruptive episodes happened over 300 different times. So there's 300 different lava flows that they've recorded. And they can tell because they can see where the one lava flow is, and there's usually some organic material gets built up over 10,000, 100,000 years, and then this next flow comes in and fills it up. And so in the gorge, we've got these 600-foot, 1,000-foot tall walls, but they're made up of what they call a layer cake of these lava flows. And when they cool, they form these hexagonal basalt columns.
That whole area, the Palouse, and that whole area is known for these columns. Yeah.
So what's interesting is I was looking at the geology of it, and each time one of those flows comes across, as it cools, all of the magnetically active material in it orients towards the Earth's magnetic North Pole at the time that it's cooling, and that gets locked into the rock in that orientation. Well, some of these are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years apart. And the magnetic North Pole has wandered over 700 miles in the last 100 years. So what happens is, as each of these flows come in, as it's cooling, it's a different magnetic orientation. And so every one of those layers has got a jumble, it's got a different locked-in magnetic orientation to it. And then we had those great floods 15,000 years ago, and it stripped it all clear. So all of that is exposed like a live wire. And I think that and all the hydroelectric power in the area contribute to this really nuanced and textured electromagnetic environment. And that may be shifting people's perceptual abilities so they are able to perceive things that they normally don't.
That's a very interesting idea, James. So it's that these creatures exist, and maybe they exist in other places, but people's perception is different in this area because of these non-ordinary magnetic fields, higgledy-piggledy magnetic fields pointing all different directions.
Exactly.
From millions of years of lava, solidifying in different directions. So people are seeing something that's there, but maybe they normally wouldn't see it because their perception's different.
Yeah.
You mentioned compasses not working in some areas around there.
So when you look at the government maps, all the navigational maps have bright pink letters on them, say, warning, your magnetic compass readings.
Oh, it says that right there on the map.
Oh, yeah, it's 100% verified.
Yeah.
So it's not even like a question that this is the case. And then I think it's 44% of all the hydroelectric power in the United States comes from the Columbia River. And so that river has been dammed 14 times, and it generates billions of kilowatts of energy every year. And each one of the dams is generating that. And then it's transmitting it over these high power tension lines, right? And so on top of all of the crazy magnetic stuff that's happening geologically, we've got this electrical infrastructure crisscrossing the whole area.
Right.
And so it's I'm trying to think of what is it about this place that makes it so active? And I think that there's a piece of the puzzle lies in that geology. The
geology and the electrical grid all add up to make a non-ordinary, anomalous electromagnetic distribution or patterns that we don't see anywhere else, probably in the world.
Yeah,
and and that's a very interesting way to look at it.
Well, you look at the work of Dr. Persinger, with the God helmet, and he was able to induce all kinds of perceptual changes in people.
Right.
Not by a strong magnetic field, but by a complex magnetic field. So it's almost like the language of the field
magnetic field
is what matters more than the strength of the field. And so this place there's so much going on there that we may be affecting our brain.
It's affecting our brain, but it also suggests to me the idea of parallel realities. It just suggests that there are things that are there all the time, maybe in the space around us right here, but you don't see it because your perceptions, somehow when your perception gets shifted, you can see a reality that's been there the whole time that we didn't really perceive and interact with. That's one way to look at it, at least,
And there seems to be something more to it, because physical evidence is left behind. Like, we are able to take pictures of orbs and UFOs and different things. We see footprints, we see air samples.
You mentioned the triangular craft over the dam in the last previous interview.
Yeah, and so many different reports like that. And so we are definitely, things are not just like, we're not just perceiving them, like they may be entering our space just as much as our perception is changing. Their perception may be changing and allowing them to participate.
Oh, so their perception's changing too. Their reality, we're kind of coming together at a common frequency, because the electrical distribution, the magnetic distribution is so particular to that area. We're getting particular creatures that gravitate to that frequency. It's something like that. We can't totally work it out. Fascinating.
Yeah, really interesting stuff.
James, thanks again. Great. Just fantastic information.
Always a pleasure.
We'll see you at Margie's Outdoor Store.
Yeah.
And thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video. Take care for now, and bye.